Hello, everyone, and welcome back to DC Talks. I am your host, Drew Kreisman. With me is my brother, Ira Kreisman, and on this episode, we continue our conversation of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, 1995 edition. And when last we left our heroes, really last we left our villains. We were having a scene with Rita and Zed unleashing Ivan Ooze, who immediately reveals himself to be an interesting and new kind of bad guy, and then says that he can smell teenagers, which is weird and gross and interesting because they're also like in the midst of teleporting to that general area, so apparently he can smell them like mid-teleportation. I don't know. Good nose, I guess.
I guess, yeah. I wanted to start this conversation by reiterating something we talked about when we talked about Mystic Quest, and that's the idea of children's literature and what it can do when it trusts its audience and where it might fall down. If it treats children as though they don't understand things, which, to be fair, they don't understand a lot. But
right, that's part of being a child.
But I think we tend to forget just how perceptive kids can be. So when we talked about Mystic Quest, much as I love that game, it has the potential here and there to engage in some interesting ideas or even engage in tragedy to some degree. Because remember, Benjamin's town is lost to an earthquake first thing, and then it's never mentioned again.
Right.
There could have been some gentle engagement on grief and tragedy, and there's just not. And so I would like to, as we're going forward, think about how, does this movie trust its young audience to keep up? Does it trust its young audience to be able to handle difficult, maybe even tragic situations? And I did say that there's not a lot of character arc in this movie. That is, no one individual ends in a completely different place, having learned about whatever. But I do think there are some nice moments here and there. So I just want to think about the concept of kids lit and see if we can point out where this movie fails or succeeds as we're going through.
Right. So the Power Rangers teleport into the construction site. They're all in their plain clothes still. They're just here on investigation. But then they see the egg. And it looks like it's been opened.
Right. Because Zed and Rita opened it.
Right. And then they noticed the security guards who are there, and they all kind of spook each other. And they, what the hell? You scared me. No, you scared me too. Aisha has a great moment. It makes two of us, buddy. And then I love it because Kimberly is very much me in this moment, back to our last episode. Where she says, so, you haven't by chance seen a morphological being lurking around here, have you?
She just comes right out with it, which is, I like. There's not a lot of examination in the show about the relationship between the Power Rangers and like the local authorities, right?
Sure.
What do the local police think about these superheroes just suddenly showing up, fighting monsters, and then teleporting away? What does the mayor think? What does the governor think? We have no idea, and that's probably for the best in a Fox Kids superhero show.
Right.
But it's interesting to think, like, if the Power Rangers show up to investigate, what do? They're not trained.
Right.
So Kimberly coming out and just saying, so you haven't by any chance seen a morphological being around here anywhere? Makes as much sense as anything. And I kind of like that there is this weird tension between the two of them.
But then the security guard says, the only thing I've seen is you teenagers. And then if there's one thing I really hate, and he starts to show that he is a morphological being, and I don't know why Ivan Ooze would sneak up on them as a security guard just to reveal himself this way. No idea why he did that, but he gets to do the reveal again. And
right. The story is that in the original script, Ivan Ooze did a lot more shape-shifting, so there would have been a lot more different actors playing Ivan Ooze.
Sure.
Not the purple version, but like the various human versions. So whatever gender, shape, ethnicity you like could have been the human form of Ivan Ooze. And this is one of my favorite bits that Ivan gets because he introduces himself.
Yeah.
And it's, who are you? And he says,
Oh,
I am the I am the galactically feared, the globally reviled, universally despised. I am Ivan Ooze.
Kind of act as Zad's like, I am just against all the things that are good. But this has a slightly more panache, and the delivery is fantastic.
He's really good at presentation, Ivan Ooze. He's got a theatricalness about him that I really appreciate.
And then Rocky, just with all the gusto in his heart, Ira, with just the goodest of good boys. Just his hair looks so nice, and he points his finger and he says, hey, you better pack your bags because we're sending you back where you came from.
There's that attitude that Zordon wanted, right?
Mm-hmm. This is one of my favorite lines in the movie, too, when Ivan says, ooh, a teenager with a big mouth. Not much has changed in 6,000 years. Got him.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Kimberly calls him Raisin Head.
Yeah. Well, you don't know who you're dealing with, Mr. Raisin Head.
Not sure that landed the way you wanted it to, Kimberly, but who knows?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, Tommy gets to give the, we're the Power Rangers. And
with Power Rangers.
Yeah.
And Ivan says, ooh, the Power Rangers. Let me get my autograph book.
My autograph book. This guy is awesome, dude.
But I love the comment here because it goes back to some of what we were talking about. Zordon still uses a bunch of kids to do his dirty work.
Right, which is precisely what Ivan says, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation, right? Like, because we had this conversation. Are these child soldiers? Or has Zordon recruited Peter Parker-like superheroes, right? And I think that's an interesting dichotomy to examine. Even though we don't go too deep into it, just hearing the villain phrase it that way is really cool.
Yeah. Then we get some more really over-the-top villain stuff where he just shoots lightning into the air out of his fingers at more just anger at the general thought of Zordon. And he has this line where he says, from this moment forth, the world as you know it shall cease to exist. Again, it's not even like they're going straight to world-ending stakes here. There's no messing around with this. Which, fair enough. And this is when he uses his special lightning magic morphological powers, I guess, to transform it's like all the rats or whatever that are around or something. And he transforms them into the creepy looking, his version of putties. Right?
Yeah, so there was originally a plan to have anthropomorphic rats be the bad guys, the foot soldiers, but it didn't work out. So what he does is they're just ooze beings. They're these purple ooze beings. There was going to be something about rats involved. And actually those rat suits get used in a couple of episodes of the show.
Interesting.
But not in the movie, yeah.
But yeah, they're pretty grody looking, and they got like weird purple tentacles, and they're clearly a lot stronger than, the putties that we had seen before. So again, a lot of raising of the stakes in the first act here.
Right. And I like that the Power Rangers, even without morphing yet, are able to hold off the foot soldiers. So Ivan says, welcome to my nightmare, and he teleports away so that our heroes can fight the foot soldiers. They jump off the cliffs to make some room, so they're down in a rock quarry, which is very Super Sentai. You often see them fighting off in the rock quarry.
Right.
So they're down in this pit in the construction zone, and there's all sorts of quips and flips and jumps that they don't really need to do. But they're able to hold them off. And Billy's got this great line where he gets one on the ground and punches it in the chest, and he's got ooze all over his fist, and he goes, you ooze, you lose. It's a bunch of that. That's
Kimberly get to give the classic, have a nice trip, see you next fall, when she busts out her... Oh, that comes a little bit later, but it's that kind of thing. Yeah, that comes once they've morphed and stuff, but... There are a few of these flippy doos that are extra flippy in a really fun way, some that are extra flippy in a really absurd way. There are 2 or 3 edits in this that, like with the rollerblade thing, I'm just like, who in the editing room didn't have enough time that day? Because there were a couple of times, it's really bizarre during this fight where one of the Rangers will go to do a front flip off of something, and then they'll edit it, and they're landing straight up. It's that's not even physically you can't contort your body that way, and it's not even like they were trying to suggest that. All you had to do was show them like twisting and landing the other way. It's so bizarre. Like there's some really, really unusual edits, but also, yeah, this fight just wasn't quite as good as I remembered it being in my head. When I was a kid, I really liked this one where they're all out. Once they get into the suits, there's some pretty cool stuff they do. Outside the suits, I agree with your observation that in general, I like that they can hang. I always enjoy that part, but the choreography leaves, and the editing especially, leaves a lot to be desired.
I also really like that Tommy feeds Ivan his line back, even though Ivan's not there anymore, because he finds a shovel and uses it as a staff or something and says, "Welcome to my nightmare."
Yeah.
All right, Tommy.
Yeah. All right. It's very excited.
And this happened in the show a lot, too. They all get sort of knocked back into each other, and they got their backs literally to a wall.
Yeah. Right.
And now it's time to morph.
Yeah.
But again, they don't escalate the fight until they need to, right? They don't
Right.
just immediately pull out their blasters and start shooting the bad guys. And we get this song. I think it's a new version of the song. It's pretty badass. You know, let's do it, guys. It's morphin' time. And everyone gets to say their animal. And you hear the various sound effects of animals, dinosaur sound effects, I guess. And suddenly they're all in their padded armor Power Rangers outfits. It's not the light spandex that we've seen before. It's got this,
right,
I don't know, sort of plasticky looking armor. I think it looks great. I know there were a lot of people at the time who hated it. Apparently it was pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say it looks plasticky. To me, it looks very metal. It looks very much more like armor. I didn't know people hated it that much. I think it looks awesome. I think that's one of the things that kind of set the movie apart. And like with everything else that we mentioned before, the command center and everything, it feels bigger and brighter and more tactile. And I think it goes along also with the fact that this is an alternate universe, right? There's these characters that don't exist anywhere else, and so in this version, the suits are a little different. And I think that that's really neat. I also want to do one nitpicky aside that I keep forgetting to bring up, but when I was going back and editing one of our last episodes and we had talked about the saber-toothed tiger, a saber-toothed tiger is not a dinosaur.
Oh yeah, neither is a mastodon. Yeah.
Right. So I just had to say that out loud at some point. I mean, like, I can't, I don't care or whatever, but it's really funny to me that they included non-dinosaurs in this thing that's very much about like a dinosaur theme, but whatever.
And they constantly call them the dino coins. So
right.
when I was writing my fan fiction 25 years ago, one of the things I did was call them not the dino coins, but the behemoth coins.
Ah, see.
Because I thought I was very clever. Yeah.
Yeah, you retconned that mistake. Well done. I like it.
They also do the thing they do in Super Sentai all the time, which is point the camera at the sky and let the stunt actors flip over the camera in costume.
Yeah. Right.
Just a classic Super Sentai Power Rangers move. And seeing it just with a higher budget is really neat. I like it a lot. And now that they're in their suits and they're doing the head motions and the big hand gestures, every movement gets a swishy sound effect, even if it's just pointing that way.
I was gonna say, dude, the every time they move their arms and stuff, I didn't notice it as much as a kid. And I love this too because, as we've talked about before in the other shows, it's the Japanese actors who are doing all of that stuff, and it's sort of more natural, at least more of a tradition there, right? But this was very clearly our American actors probably doing these things for the first time. And they have there's just a slightly different tenor about it, if that's the right word, right? They're doing it, but not quite as precisely as the Japanese actors do. But there's something kind of stiff and American about it in a good way that, again, makes it feel different. But you're right, it's wild to see in the much higher production value the kind of sillier element still there, and they had to do it, right? Because it had to fit and feel.
Well, so the story is, and I've heard some interviews, right? And so one of the things is in the costumes, the actors in the costumes, they brought some of them from the American show because there was some American footage of in the Power Rangers costumes.
Sure.
So they brought some of those actors down to Australia to be the actors in the suits. So some of it, they knew because they had been practicing for the last couple of years, but some of the stiffness is because the suits are so much heavier.
Sure, that makes sense too. So yeah.
So it's interesting that, that we had some American stunt actors who had to learn how to do that tokusatsu thing. But I think you're right that there's a clear difference between the way the Japanese suit actors do it and the way the American suit actors do it. I couldn't put my finger on it exactly.
Yeah.
But I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I also really like that once they were done with their morphing sequence and their flippy-doos over the camera, all the Ooze foot soldiers are gone.
Yeah.
They didn't wait around.
Nope. Unfortunately, Boss Man is tearing up the command center. It's actually legitimately kind of sad.
It's kind of rough. I like the back and forth between Zordon and Ivan because it sounds like they've been having this argument, that they had this argument before. So the first thing he does is he zaps Alpha, Ivan does.
Yeah.
And Zordon says, "You haven't changed, Ooze. You're still picking on creatures smaller than yourself." Which is...
You haven't stopped giving lectures, old man. They're an old married couple, aren't they? They're just...
Yeah. 10 minutes out of the egg, and I'm already listening to one of your lectures.
Yeah.
And he's not got a bad point when he says, "Do you have any idea what it's like to be locked away for 6,000 years?"
Yeah.
And on the one hand, Zordon is a head in a tube.
Sure.
On the other hand, he does get to interact with the world.
Right.
And Ivan summons his flute, I guess.
He does.
Time to pay the piper, he says, and starts zapping the command center, blowing it up.
It's sad to see if you've loved this place for a couple of seasons of television, too. It's like, oh, man.
Right.
No one's ever been able to... They make a big deal about it, too, and they remark you can't get in there without a power coin. We should be fine, but he can just ooze his way in, literally, and it's... Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've never seen anyone take it to Alpha and Zordon like this before. I mean, I remember being, shocked by this as a kid.
Yeah, it's attacking the home base. This is where we're safe, and it's not safe anymore. We cut back to our superheroes. I think we're in a parking garage now. Sure, why not?
Right.
One of the things that I eventually learned to find odd in the show was how we'd be in that rock quarry and then suddenly we're by the beach, right?
Sure.
And that was a symptom of the American version cutting together different fight scenes.
Sure.
We'd be in the park in Angel Grove and then suddenly, we were in the middle of a desert or something. Right. So I like that now we're in a parking garage, which sort of looks like the construction zone, but doesn't really. And okay, fine, why not?
Right.
We get some neat sort of upgrades. The Yellow Ranger, Aisha, gets essentially headlamps in her saber-toothed tiger cat eyes.
Yeah. I like that there's a bunch of totally unexplained things that their suits can do that they haven't been able to do before. Again, very Elseworldy.
Right.
And they act like they've always had them. Like when they're in the dark, They're like, "Aisha, use your light thing that of course you've always had." Like, wait, what?
Right. Rocky gets a scanner thingy. And then they don't ever use the regular power weapons from the show. There's no power sword or power daggers.
Right.
But like you pointed out, Kim gets a special pterodactyl thunder whip, and Billy gets the Stega Stinger, which is, I don't know, a grappling hook kind of thing?
Yeah, I guess.
Zip line?
Yeah. Zip line. Yeah, I think it's more like that. Like impromptu zip line thing so that I can get conveniently over to places.
Right, yeah. And this is once they re-engage with the Oozlings, this is a cool fight scene. And it's tense before that. It's dark and there's mist. Look out and here we go. And then, it's a cool fight scene. Lots of silly sound effects, lots of fart noises when you punch the ooze monsters.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, wait, are they really doing that? And there's a bunch of fart noises when they're punching the ooze monsters. It's like, oh man, really?
So I like it a lot. I do kind of wish there had been some continuity in the use of the weapons, maybe the blasters, because they all have those sidearms still at their side, but they never use them.
Right.
They rarely used them in the show either. They rarely use those guns. But they got them there and they never use them. But maybe that's part of don't escalate. They can't shoot, so we don't shoot.
Sure.
Maybe.
I don't know. There's a great but totally ridiculous moment, too, where they all kind of regroup and they sort of all backflip into formation. And then Tommy is up on something up above them. And he does a front flip with just way too many flips. And
Right.
It's ridiculous, but at least they're wearing the suits. So you're like, eh.
Yeah, so he's got his superpowers.
Right.
So that stunt was done in reverse and then sped up.
Ah, interesting.
So it's a neat bit of filmmaking, I guess, stunt work.
Why not?
And it's superpowers, fine.
Right.
What does bother me a little bit is Saba, Tommy's sword in the White Ranger outfit, is a person, has a personality.
Right.
Can talk.
Right.
And he gets a moment here, but doesn't then get to do or say anything in the whole movie.
Right. Also, this is my favorite stupid thing that happens, at least in the first half of the movie. There's like one point where a bunch of the Ooze guys are sort of, without knowing it, standing underneath, I don't know, a big thing that they can drop on him. And Tommy takes out Saba and says, go get him. This is the part you're talking about. And Saba is, remember, a knife, a sword, a dagger, a cutty device.
Right.
And instead he uses his eye lasers to cut the thing to drop on the guys.
Right. It's very Looney Tunes. It's very... Yes. We don't chop each other up. We squish each other, I guess. And that's better. There's
even one moment where like two Rangers will kick a guy on either side of the head and then his eyes bulge like Looney Tunes. Yeah. Like it really is. Yeah. It's awfully silly, but it's fun silly.
It is. And I think there's an interesting collection of special effects, I guess, because I just talked about the stunt that they did on wires and in reverse and then sped up. Right. But then also there's some sort of Looney Tunes graphics. And there's some, we talked about the teleportation CG being pretty bad. But we're going to get to some big puppets on the planet of Phaedos. Like we got and we still got guys in rubber suits. Yeah. Right? Goldar and Mordant are in rubber suits.
Right.
I think Rita and Zed's costumes look fantastic. So I like that they went with all the different kinds of special effects. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I see what you're saying. And there's actually some good effects here during this fight, too, where like they realize they've got to kind of kick or shove or throw the Ooze men into something that'll make them burst. And once they figure that out and start, like the effects when they burst into the Ooze are pretty great. One of them gets thrown like into a grate and it like flips. It's like, it's pretty, this is good stuff.
All right, so like you said, Saba cuts the thing and squishes the last of the Oozelings. And as soon as they've won the fight, that's when the effects of Ivan Ooze blowing up the power chamber from the inside has an effect. Their powers fade, their suits go away, Saba disappears forever. I really liked Saba.
Into the dark dimension.
In the show, Saba is very sassy. And gives Tommy a hard time, which I always really appreciated.
Yeah.
So you try the communicators first. There's no signal. We got to get to the power chamber. And again, I'm forced to wonder, do they walk? Like, do we get a bus out of Angel Grove and then walk a few miles into the desert? I don't quite understand how that works.
Well, we turn off the camera, and then when we turn it back on, they're there.
Got it.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So they come up to the doors of the power chamber. Someone says, "Oh no, Ooze." So if we're thinking about kids lit, right? On the one hand, we could all see that. Right. We get it. Right. But maybe for little kids, it's nice to have some of those markers.
Sure.
Because they're going to state the stakes a couple times here in a bit. And I feel like they state it too many times. But again, you can trust your audience, but you still have to tell them things, I guess.
Right.
And this is a legit sad scene. They pull open the doors, they go in, everything's wrecked.
Yeah.
The lights are mostly down. And Zordon's tube is gone, and he's lying on a bed of crystals, sort of, and he's very pale, very wrinkly, not quite human, but humanoid, in sort of a silvery robe, and just lying there, barely able to breathe.
Yeah.
And they run up to him. They all seem, very upset by this. This is their mentor. I think as Billy says, outside of his time warp, he's dying. He needs power. Right? So that's now the goal. That's the storyline of the movie.
Right.
And Zordon's kind of given up. The power has been destroyed, he says.
Okay, do you bump on this at all? You're better and deeper in the lore than me, and I tend to let a lot of things go. But this does have the feel of the type of thing that, I don't know how much I buy Zordon being so, it's over, we've lost. He's always the opposite voice there, but maybe because he's out of his tube, he's out of his element, he's not himself. Again, multiverse explanation. He's maybe not the exact same Zordon that we know. Or maybe, again, they're really just trying to drive up the stakes and like you said, in my mind, maybe overselling it a little bit by having even Zordon lose hope. So how could our heroes possibly go on? But they'll find a way. It's like, I don't know. Yeah, I didn't love it. I don't love it.
It does strike me as a bit out of character, given how he behaves in the show and will continue to behave in the show, where there's always another set of powers, or there's always another thing. Like once they lose the ninja, or once the ninja powers become obsolete, there's the Zeo crystal.
Sure.
And once Divatox shows up, we're going to upgrade to Turbo or whatever. And that's at least as much because the new season is coming up and we need to use new footage.
The show must literally go on.
But it eventually, as we go through in space, Zordon's been mentoring Ranger teams on various planets for years. And so it does feel, but like you said, nobody's gotten into the power chamber before, so maybe he is feeling it. Kimberly's line here always struck me as surprisingly poignant. Because she says, Zordon, you can't leave us. Ever since you've come into our lives, you've been like a father to us all. Now, we don't know a lot about the home lives of the Power Rangers.
None of them have families. They're all off screen.
Right. Yeah, we do eventually meet Tommy's brother, and as fan fiction authors, we would all come up with families for them to have.
Sure.
Because you can't tell anybody, right? So that's a fun point of tension. So yeah, it's interesting,
Maybe it's a Final Fantasy VIII situation. I'm not saying any more than that. That would kind of explain some things, actually.
But even if they've all got great family lives, I had people in my life growing up who were teachers I particularly liked, and so maybe it's that kind of an idea.
Sure. Yeah, I think so.
I don't want any of my fun high school English teachers to be outside their time warp either.
Fair enough. Right.
So Alpha makes his presence known. They run to him to see if he's okay. It's worth noting that 5 of the Rangers run over there, but Kimberly stays at Zordon's side.
Yeah.
So we talked about, or I keep saying there's not a lot of character arcs here. There's not a lot of character changing, but it's worth noting that particular difference.
Yeah.
So Alpha says there may be a power that can save Zordon. It's on the distant planet of Phaedos, and all who have tried for it have perished. And you just talked about Rocky being like, with his full chest, all the good boy energy in the world.
Yeah.
He immediately says, well, we have to try. No hesitation.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's great. Like, there are 6 characters here whose personalities we need to get.
Right.
And even though some of the quips are just sort of generic 90s quips,
right,
some of them really are about who these people are. So Rocky is absolutely, we're going to do this. We're going to get this done. Tommy is the fearless leader. Kimberly is very sensitive.
Right.
So I do like some of these moments. Alpha says, if I can technobabble this and a crystal in there, I might have just enough power to get you there. But Rangers, there is no power to get you back.
Ah, one-way trip. Well.
And there's a lot of subtle acting in this scene, too, because all these characters are looking at each other. There's a lot of small nods.
Yeah.
Like Aisha touches Kimberly's shoulder a couple times. There's a lot of that here. These are really good friends. Yeah,
they really do come across as that found family. And I've often said already in this podcast that beyond the fun suits and the powers and the big dinosaur and dinosaur-esque robot fights, the team dynamics are always what I loved about Power Rangers. Just that, yeah, they fight for each other, and as much like you said, they may not go through a ton of change. Those moments when they really have to be there for each other, I buy them, and I agree. I think for as much as there's some non-subtle acting in this movie, because there, again, maybe arguably has to be, there are great moments of subtlety, and this whole scene, I think, is filled with them from everybody.
So now we have our stakes. We've got to save Zordon. That's basically the big narrative push of the movie. It's save Zordon, save the world. And Alpha reiterates, like I said, we've already got the stakes, but he says it again. He's got the doohickey and the whatsy. He's going to transport them to a distant planet. And he says, remember, Rangers, Zordon doesn't have much time. He's got about an hour and a half, so we can get this movie wrapped up in an hour and a half.
Yeah, right.
But that's, again, we got it. Zordon's going to, Billy said it earlier, outside his time warp, he's going to die. Alpha says it again. So I do wonder if they say it too many times, or if they said it exactly the right number of times for a young audience.
Yeah, fair enough.
But there is, my complaint about Mystic Quest was, it doesn't matter that Benjamin's village disappears in that earthquake at the beginning, but it absolutely matters to these 6 young people whether or not Zordon lives or dies.
Right.
And there was a big thing about never saying the word die or kill in the show. They would always say destroy.
Destroy or perish or things like that. Yeah, that's in original Star Wars trilogy stuff too. They don't kill, they destroy.
Right. And there's still, I don't think they say kill here, but they do say, doesn't have much time is pretty clear. And Billy does say he's dying. Right. Now we have one of the top performances in all of cinema in 1995. Oh, wow. Ivan Ooze is about to commit a coup.
Yeah, he sure is. I do love that Alpha, before we get to the coup, after he teleports the Rangers off, he saves his negativity till after they're gone, because with Zordon being all doom and gloom, Alpha has to say, there might be a way. I'm giving you one last bit of hope. And then they teleport off and he goes, aye, they're doomed. At least he waited till they were gone. And then, yes, how beautiful and amazing is this takeover? Yeah.
So first of all, the set is badass.
Right?
When Zed took over for Rita, he transformed the Moon Palace into this badass place, but the cinematic version is really cool. It's all stone and rock, and we got the big stone throne, and behind it is that fan that's iconic from season 2. So the Rangers teleport past the moon, and Rita's already, she's had it. Another failure. I can't believe it. How could he let them slip through his hands?
Right.
And then Ivan shows up in the throne room. And, honey, I'm home. Because he's got to enter with presentation, right? With theatricality.
Right.
Rita immediately starts in because her superpower is berating her underlings.
Right.
She says, "You egg-sucking purple pinhead. The Rangers are going after the great power. I thought you said this guy was the master of disaster. He's nothing but a slime-infested jelly donut." Now, I've got 2 things here. One, how does she know they're going after the great power? They just teleported away. Yeah. Maybe they were running away, Rita.
No, she knows the direction of that particular planet. So they're going east on I-70. They're definitely going after the great power.
But I also love the look on Ivan Ooze's face. We talked about the actor.
Yeah.
So he just so had it with these people.
Yeah.
So he flicks some ooze and it hits her in the mouth.
Yeah.
And now she can't talk.
Yeah. And Zed is very pleased.
Finally, somebody shut her up. All right, you jerk.
Ha 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 ha. Yeah, well, it's about to be your turn too, buddy.
Ivan says, "Your feebleness is staggering.
Ooh.
You need a vacation." And he walks down into the throne room, and the mist is swirling, and he walks right up to Zed. And he says, "Circumstances force us to choose a new leader, and I pick me." And it's great. And he walks right up to Zed's throne and sits down
in it, voting for yours truly.
Says the boogeyman is taken over. And he has a lot of snot and fart puns, so I have to assume boogeyman in this case is referring to snot.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, and also, the boogeyman that you're afraid of under your bed, he's the scary, spooky, general boogeyman. So I think it works both ways. Double meaning, look at that. How about that? Layers in the writing. I do actually think that Ivan Ooze is written at several layers up. I've noticed this in a lot of kids' movies, that the bad guy can say words like feebleness and talk about how circumstances lead to X, Y, and Z, and use certain words that kids maybe won't understand, because part of a little kid hating an adult is talking over them or talking past them or not being able to get it, I think. I don't know that there's a specific reason to that. I would guess that that's the reason why, but just something that I've noticed, that a lot of times the villains are kind of the ones who are allowed to use fancy words, because what a bunch of jerks.
All right, so Lord Zed isn't having it. He says no, but he double-crosses Lord Zed and lives. So we got a death threat. And he zaps Ivan Ooze, apparently in an attempt to kill him. But as we all know, Ooze does not take damage from lightning.
Right. Clearly got resistance to lightning.
And apparently he's got a very specialized capture spell. He zaps Rita and Zed, and now they're trapped in a snow globe. Sure, why not?
Okay. I mean, there's no reason given for it as opposed to any other prison device or whatever. But it's funny. He gets to shake them around and they're in prison and he gets to laugh at them. And that's kind of funny. And then give them little voices.
So I'm playing Final Fantasy VIII right now for our Final Fantasy podcast.
Sure.
One of the goofiest abilities is to be able to turn monsters into cards.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of what this is.
Yeah. He just
why not?
Made the two primary villains of the first two seasons of Power Rangers into a toy.
Ivan says to Goldar and Mordant, now you two have a choice. You can either serve me or you can join these two insufferable dingle dorks. Now, as a young person, I didn't necessarily know the word insufferable. I did know the word dingle dorks.
Sure, even though I don't believe I'd ever heard it in quite that order before. And man, again, it takes quite the actor to be able to sell the phrase dingle dorks. And he does it quite well. And I love the comedic timing of the repetition. Whoever's doing the voice for Goldar, again, selling such a silly line. Say, hey, we never liked those dingle dorks in the first place. Which is some Waldrig level bootlicking here from Goldar and Mordant. Just, we hated those guys. Just, they can still hear you, dude. But they immediately turn on the people who were their bosses 12 seconds ago, and it's great. And to your point about some things that are a little more subtle and trusting your kid audience to see that sharp contrast between the deep loyalty that the Rangers have for their leader and their, father-like figure versus the way that the bad guys immediately turn on each other as soon as the circumstances benefit them to do so. And they don't really just, point that out. You trust your younger audience to see that. That's just some cowardly behavior, even if it's kind of funny the way they do it.
Yeah, excellent. I like that observation a lot. So one of them says, so, all right, new master, what are we going to do about the Power Rangers? And Ivan says, the Power Rangers. And he goes,
don't do it. No, I'm not. No, don't do. No. Yeah.
He's really gross, right? He spits this
gnarly.
Huge. Yeah.
This also reminded me that I don't think as a society any longer use the phrase hockaloogie. I don't know. I can't remember the last time I heard somebody say hockaloogie. Was that just a 90s thing? Because if ever there was a loogie that were hawked, it were this one.
No kidding. And I like the commentary of, nice distance.
Yeah, Morton's impressed by it. It's so disgusting. But in a good way. In like this guy is a creep, right? And then the booger grows into these like hawk warrior things that scared the crap out of me when I was a kid.
So in the third season of Power Rangers, Rita Repulsa's brother, Rito, shows up to the moon.
Oh, I remember him.
And he's a skeleton for some reason.
Funny.
Doesn't matter. The point is he had buried some eggs on the moon a long time ago, and they hatch into the Tengu warriors. And they become the new foot soldiers. Rita and Zed no longer use putties. They use Tengu warriors. So, they use very similar, if not the same costumes for the Tengu warriors in the movie. Yeah. I think they use the word Tengu because goo, right?
Sure.
And he's Ivan Ooze. But also Tengu are a figure in Japanese religion. I'm not sure if they're religious figures or if they're folkloric figures, or maybe sometimes that's the same thing, right? Sometimes there's a lot of crossover there. But which are these spirits that, the leaders of which have very long noses or sometimes beaks and are sometimes associated with birds. So, I like these foot soldiers. I think they're interesting and creepy and pretty cool.
So, as I want to start doing more and more, silly as it is, I'm going to read straight from the Wikipedia page. Tangu, or heavenly dog, or heavenly sentinel, are a type of legendary creature found in Japanese folk religion, particularly Shinto, apparently. A kind of yokai, or supernatural beings. Sometimes Shinto kami, or gods, depending on the story that you're dealing with. They can also commonly take the form of birds of prey, or monkeys, or a monkey deity. Yeah, there's an interesting history to the Tangu that these seem to be drawing on a little bit for inspiration. And they also come with another super badass musical cue as they take form and this funky evil bass line kicks in. And yeah, this is a great introduction to these scary ass things.
So our heroes teleport to the planet of Phaedos, which I'm pretty sure is just a rocky beach
I was going to
in
say,
New Zealand.
I appreciate that Kimberly immediately is like, wow, look at this place. But also...
Right. Yeah. And it's beautiful and it's
beach.
Great.
It is. But also, like, they live in California. They've seen rocky beaches before.
Sure. And I also want to point out that the director, and there is I should see if I can find this interview. I remember him talking about, we've got 6 main characters, and you need to be able to get them all in frame and be able to see everybody's face a lot. And so how do you do that several times without the shot becoming repetitive? And I feel like, so watching the movie through that lens, that they do a pretty good job of, so here they're all just lined up. The heroes land on an alien planet. But here in the second, they're going to have like 2 or 3 in the foreground and the other 3 in the background, and some of them will be kneeling in such a way to all look at this skeleton.
Right.
So they're on this beach, they're looking around, what do we do next? And then Aisha's like, hey guys, over here. So they run over there, and there's a skeleton of what appears to have been a person, but with horns, so some kind of an alien bipedal humanoid. And there's bits of leather and tech on it. Somebody had a bad day.
Yeah, right.
But again, so they were all on the beach. We could see all of them just front-facing shot, and now they're all sort of gathered around this skeleton, and we can still see everybody's faces, and that has got to be a trick as a director.
Yeah.
So we get a little bit of, what was it? Oh, or what is it? I think Adam says, and Billy says, I think the question is, what was it?
What was it? No.
All right.
We can see
ass.
that it's a skeleton, Billy, but thank you.
And then Tommy gets the line of, come on, guys, we got a job to do. Again, a lot of this is just very simple.
Right.
Pulling us along in the narrative. But it is sort of tailored to each character. And I can appreciate that. So our heroes start walking down the beach, and the camera pulls way back, and we get this big overhead shot. And as we follow them walking, suddenly we have a figure in screen left, a hooded, green-robed figure.
Yeah.
And the music gets all ominous. And I would like to point out that on Earth, we got pop music. We got some other stuff also, but we had, songs with lyrics.
Right.
While we're out here on the planet of Phaedos, there's none of that.
Right. It's an orchestral score, and it's a pretty good one too. Again, the music in this film is very, very good.
So our heroes are here on Phaedos. Zordon doesn't have much time. They're seeking out the great power. Join us next time.
And they're being watched. Thank you for listening, and thank you as always to everyone who has reached out to us. Feel free to hit us up on Twitter or here on the Patreon page or in the Discord if you'd like to do a little more Power Rangers conversation. Always having fun with this, as silly as it may be. Don't forget to subscribe to, all of the stuff, both Patreon pages, the YouTube channel for Final Fantasy stuff if you're into it, or if you're just here for Power Rangers, don't forget to check us out next time as we continue our conversation on the 1995 Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie.